And you were saying about your
before our technical difficulties.
That's right, a little technical difficulty.
I guess you know, your line of questioning was about my parents and about my background, and yeah, I was mentioning the fact that my mom and her sister married best friends, and you know, those were the war years too, and Mom and Dad got married right before Dad was shipped off, like I guess was the case to an awful lot of people at that point in time. And he spent the war in England with the 8th Air Force. And he and his best friend Jack kept in touch even during the war. And Jack was in Patton's army. It was actually in the Battle of the Bulge. And I remember as a kid, he would tell stories that your hair would stand up in the back of your neck, because what he would do is he would call in artillery. So he would be actually close to or behind enemy lines, and the radio and a pair of binoculars. But he can tell some stories. My dad, his stories are.
Was he a younger brother, or this is your dad's brother?
No, this is my dad's best friend.
Your dad's best friend. I'm sorry.
They married sisters.
Okay.
You know, so,
okay.
Yeah.
How many siblings was in your dad's family?
Just one. He had half brother.
Okay.
Just one. But anyway, so to answer your question about the interesting stories in the family line, when the war was over, my father came home and back to his old job here. He was a meter reader for the Philadelphia Gas Works, and went to college on the GI Bill. And as I heard all of my life, graduated maximum cum laude. What's the matter with you? And he actually retired a vice president from the Philadelphia Gas Works. So, you know, it's in the public utility of southeastern Pennsylvania, he was a success story. And did well.
Talk about your own family right now, Chris. What's your current family situation?
Currently, I have 2 grown children. I have a son, Christian, and a daughter, Patricia. Christian is a engineer right now. He's working for Briggs & Stratton. I had to think for a second, because a long time he worked for Fisher Price making and breaking toys. But now he's up in Wisconsin making lawnmowers and things of that ilk. And Patricia is a teacher and teaches kindergarten in Corona, Queens. And I'm very happily married. My wife, Alita, and I have about to celebrate our 12th wedding anniversary coming up in May. And ours is an interesting story that, you know, when people ask, our humorous answer always is that we're a movie, because you know, some parts of my life where you know, the life-altering event was that I was in a tragic car accident and lost my wife at that time, Joan, with whom I taught. She was a English teacher at East Junior High for like forever. And Alita had come along. Actually, Alita, I'm skipping ahead here. Mm-hmm. My wife, Alita, had lost her husband in a tragic accident as well. Her husband, about the same time that I lost Joni. I think there was a 2.5-year difference, but Joan, or Alita's husband, worked for Loco, and he was really a tragic accident. He was crushed by one of between 2 Loco trucks, and she tells a story about hearing about the accident by being pulled out of the classroom. Yeah, it's pretty icky stuff. But anyway, fast forwarding to today, the movie part is that dear friends of ours introduced us, and we just hit it off immediately, and became a kind of a, you know, midlife whirlwind romance, and that worked out wonderfully for both of us.
Tell me about the personalities of the children. How are Pat, Patricia, and Chris different or the same in terms of talents, skills, abilities?
Well, they're very different. Like all kids are very different. Chris, as a child, was very challenging. He was very challenging, actually, until he became into his teens. Once he went through puberty or got into puberty, he really calmed down quite a bit and became a much easier kid to be around. But when he was younger, man, he was an imp. If you weren't watching him, lamps were sliding off tables and all kinds of things like that were going on. And Patricia was very different. She was a very easy baby. She was an easy child to be around. She knew how to, I guess, handle her father, get the things that she needed. But she was a real sweetheart. And nowadays, she recently had a baby, a grandson, and all of her energies when she's not in the classroom are just focused completely on Oliver Scott, he just turned a year in December, so he's up and walking and running around. And
who in the family does he most resemble?
That's a very interesting question, because there are times when we look at each other and say, "Oh my heavens, he looks exactly like Christian, the grandson, my son's son, Christian." He'll have the same facial expressions and so maybe he's going to take on that part of the family, that part of the characteristics.
Have your children's mom, is she still alive? Is she?
Yeah, perhaps we should. Yeah, perhaps we should. Get the scoreboard out and keep track here, because my life has been. It's had a few events in it. Yeah, I got married early in college. Matter of fact, I was a senior in college when I got married, and I don't know if we want to jump ahead to this or not, but the very first day that I'm in the classroom in Brentwood, which was September 9th, 1970, my son was born. And it was very stressful because I had come here from Pennsylvania, and he was late arriving, so mother and baby-to-be were still in Pennsylvania. And back in those days, the new teachers that were hired to the district were required to attend a week-long orientation process. And about midway through that, now I'm on Long Island, and my wife at the time, who was going into labor, is in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And I get a panicked phone call. I'm going to have a baby tonight. So I got the okay to kind of skip out on most of the orientation program. So here we are, the game day, and she's having a baby, and I'm in a classroom, and I can't. I really felt at that point in time, I can't now go to these people who just hired me and haven't seen me do anything and say, I got to leave again. So since the first day of school was technically a Wednesday, I'll be there Friday night. So that part of my life started chaotically, continued chaotically. And the marriage really didn't survive some of the cards that we were dealt, I suppose. So about 9 years on, we agreed to have a divorce. And of course, another life-changing event that's very stressful and painful and all of that. After that incident had passed through my life, that is when Joan came into the picture. Now, I had taught with Joan for, I guess 10 years at that point, or close to 10 years, and we had become friends. And she had gone through a divorce almost simultaneously, and through commiserating and through socializing with other people, we just clicked and it happened. So Joan and I got married in 1981 and had a wonderful, very happy 14 or 15 years together before, you know, the tragic accident that I was talking about, which was, you know, that happened on Valentine's Day. We were coming home from work. We were on our way out to dinner with a couple of stops in town. At that point in time, we lived out in the Riverhead, Southampton area, and we got within, you know, 5 miles of home, and a young unlicensed driver went through a stop sign, and the rest is history. So, yeah, Joni didn't survive the accident, and I was laid up for almost 3 months between the hospital operation process and then the rehabilitation process. It was pretty lengthy. And one of the things that came out of that was a real eye-opener was the support and the love that poured in my direction. And it came from Brentwood. Came from all the people who were family at East Junior High School. I had taught at East Junior High from 70 to 86. And then 86, 87, I had gone on to the high school as a guidance counselor. So, like, as I said, the outpouring of support was amazing. And Joni's students were just, the response from them, hard to describe.
Joan, as a former Marine, brought something extra special to her work with the kids from Brentwood, too.
Oh, she certainly did. She certainly did. She was a former Marine, and I used to hear that all the time. And my standard line was, you know, how many guys do you know that sleep with a Marine? But yeah, she loved the Marine Corps, and shortly before, I guess actually it was after we had decided to get married, is when she formally left the Corps, because she was in the Marine Reserves for a good part of her career. You know, she was a major, actually, when she retired, a major in the Marine Corps.
Chris, I want to ask you a question that we got away from a little bit, and that is, does Christopher and Patricia still have contact with their mom?
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Definitely.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Coming back to you, when and where were you born?
When? Well, September 29th, 1948 makes me officially a boomer. And where? Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the family was from. And I was, you know, my parents were that post-World War II, that's so many of us, or so many of my colleagues are from that era. And yeah, what they did, trying to make life better for their kids and their family, was they moved to the Philadelphia equivalent of suburbia, which was Northeast Philadelphia at the time was country. I mean, I often tell people that growing up when I was in junior high school, for example, I had a trap line. I would actually put on hip boots in the morning, and before I would go to school, and go out and check my trap lines. I would trap muskrats and raccoons and things like that. And this was down the street and across the street from where I lived, which was still within the Philadelphia city limits, you know. Of course, it's much different now, but, you know, again, they had moved out. It looked like the country to them. It was the country. I can remember the grade school that I went to was literally across the street, and next to it was a dairy farm. And again, this is Philadelphia. So,
what's your earliest memory then of that time of your life?
My earliest memory, I don't know if it's my earliest, but a poignant one is walking through that dairy farm pasture on my way to school, first grade, and being above my ankles in mud, losing my shoes. So I don't know if that's my earliest memory, but, you know, following on the heels of talking about, you know, those early years in Somerton, Pennsylvania.
What was your mother's maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Ruth Scott. which is my middle name, which is my grandson, my daughter's son's middle name, Oliver Scott. And if you were around my dad for 5 minutes, you would say, well, who's Scotty? Because that's my mother's nickname, Scotty.
Was because she was raised as she was an orphan, you mentioned before. Did she ever meet her birth parents or birth?
Oh, she has fond memories of her parents. She was a little girl, but she's, matter of fact, I just saw them this past weekend. They're still alive. Mom just turned 87. That was the occasion of a little party visit there. I wish her a happy birthday. But she was telling us the story about not being allowed to attend his funeral, her father's funeral, which is, I guess, is what they did at that point in time. And that her and my Aunt Eleanor, remember sitting on the steps with his picture waiting for him to come home. So, yeah, she remembers that. She lost her mother. Actually, her mother died as a result of childbirth with Eleanor, who was the youngest sister. And, you know, they remember her coming home but not getting well. And I think it was probably, you know, septic shock or something like that from the hospital. I mean, at least that's the family story.
When you were very young and you would watch your mother in moments of joy or enjoyment, what was it that she would be doing? What did she like to do? What gave her pleasure?
What gave her pleasure? My mother loves to talk. She still loves to talk. So I think that the moments that I remember her was visiting with other family and telling stories and enjoying reminiscing, and she still does that. So
you mentioned your father's background and occupation. Do you have a particular warm memory of your dad when you were a little guy? Something?
Yeah, I do. And it's funny because I was thinking about it the other day when I was posting a picture on my website and talking about the fact that this weekend is the start of baseball season. Major League Baseball season starts. And some of those early memories are Dad taking me to the ballpark, and that would have been Connie Mack Stadium in Philadelphia to watch the Phillies. And yeah, it was kind of a tradition that we had. And even as I became a little bit older, I would, in high school, in junior high school, I would take the train and meet him, and we'd go to a ball game. You know, he would, instead of coming home from work, I would meet him in downtown Philly, and we'd go to the ball game. So, yeah. So
you're not an only child.
No, I have a brother and a sister.
What are their names?
Well, my brother Bill, and my sister's Peggy, Margaret. Peggy's a nurse, and she's married to a physician, and they kind of have a business, you know, a medical business in Westchester, Pennsylvania, outside of Philly. And my brother is an administrator for, it would be, the closest thing I could come to here would be Bosie's in Indiana. It's called R.O.B.S. He works for...
Educator.
Yeah, he's an educator too.
Have you ever done any family history or genealogy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, my father was very much into it maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And when I was dating Alida, lo and behold, she had gotten into it. So the three of us kind of combined everything together. And yeah, some interesting stuff there.
Where are the roots of family for you?
Well, it's Irish and English pretty much, and my mother's side is French Canadian, but they're really Scots. I know her maiden name was Scott, but there were evidently during that migration or immigration, some of the Scots went to Canada, and some went further south to Maryland and that part of the Northeast, you know, or Middle Atlantic states.
And you do your share of traveling, so have you ever attempted to visit some of the early sites?
I've deferred to Alida. Her family is from Sicily and Italy, and as a matter of fact, yes, we went to Agrigento, and did everything but knock on doors trying to find her side of the family, which was a wonderful experience.
Where?
In Agrigento.
In Agrigento.
In Sicily. That's in Sicily.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of our fondest travel memories is that we left the group that we were with one Sunday and said, we want to get lost. We want to get lost in Agrigento, and we did. And it was the friendliness of the people who thought they all asked us if we were crazy because we didn't have jackets on. And it was, I guess it was late March or early April, and the temperature was in the 70s, and people were coming out in sweaters and coats, and why are you dressed like that? But yeah, we didn't find her family. The tour director that we were with was such a nice man. He actually got the phone book for Agrigento and called we were looking for a Zambuto, and called every Zambuto in a phone book asking if they had relatives in New York. And so it's quite an experience. But I have to answer your original question. I haven't been to Scotland. Okay. And I don't even know, I know my father's grandmother came over during the potato famine from Ireland. And he's always, the thing that stymied him in his genealogy research was he couldn't find the marriage license for her and her husband. And he knows that they were married upstate Pennsylvania. And he kind of gave up. He couldn't find, because that was like the holy grail, the key that would answer, where you could go from there. Yes. So, but
what about other formative adult influences in your life when you were growing up? Besides your mother and father, were there other people that had a particular impact on your outlook, values, attitudes, interests?
Well, teachers come to mind, and coaches. Mm-hmm. I think my next door neighbor's father, growing up as a pre-high school, my best friend was the kid next door, and he and his father did stuff that my father didn't do, like fishing and hunting, which were things that I was very much interested in. So yeah, I think I learned an awful lot of fishing, which I still love to do today, from Mr. Winslow, who was the gentleman next door.
Who most influenced your decision to go into the field that you went to, Chris? Where did that come from?
Probably coaches, football coaches in high school. You really get to know people in that setting, especially if they're open and not, what's the right word, not punitive, but encourage you to grow. And it just looked like such a rewarding thing to do that I kind of decided early on. I guess I was maybe in 10th grade in high school when I kind of really felt pretty strongly that this is something I would like to do. And what really helped me in the classroom was that I guess starting with, I was a junior in high school, and for 3 consecutive summers after that, I worked at a camp. And I worked at a camp in Cape Cod where I taught swimming. I was a lifeguard. Well, the first year, actually, they put me in charge of a sports program. And unbeknownst to me, a camp is run a lot of ways like a school. The kids go to classes. They go to swimming for an hour. They go to arts and crafts for an hour. Whatever the activities are, so that as a person who was teaching swimming, for example, you would have 5 or 6 classes. You would have different levels that you were teaching, or you were teaching a first aid course, or and then they had like general swim. So when they gave me cafeteria duty, I was like, I've been here before. It really did help me in the classroom with student management and things like that, because they don't teach any of that in college. You got the classroom, you're on your own. But some of the techniques that had worked, handling large groups of kids in camp.
What about now, fast forwarding to the time that you're in your role as a counselor, have what's been one of the most difficult choices that you've ever had to make?
There have been many.
Yeah. Just pick one then that comes to mind.
It's tough, John.
Okay.
I would say that there always were issues with teenage girls trying to cope with ending a pregnancy or keep it going, and I struggled with that. I struggled with that because, my Catholic background, and yet I also knew and had seen that babies don't make good parents, and that kids in poverty having kids is going to just keep it going. So it was difficult for me to walk that line, and keep saying, I know you'll make the right decision for you. Have you thought about all of this? So that's probably the toughest one.
You have probably been fortunate in that you've had many unforgettable teachers in your life. But if you could name two of them, let's say, two people that, as far as your own experience is concerned, you remember very, very well.
Yeah, one would be a gentleman by the name of Jerry Keene, who was, I guess he was the department head of physical education in my high school, who treated me like, I don't want to say an adult, but didn't talk down to me and encouraged me. And he was very influential.
What was Chris, one of your favorite games when you were
athletic games, sports, football and baseball were definitely there.
Do you remember your first paying job?
Yes, I do.
What would that have been?
There was a lace mill not too far from the house. I guess it was, an industrial park out down the road and up towards Roosevelt Boulevard there. And they had these machines that would make hair curlers, or at least they made the sleeves that went over the hair curlers. Big, loud machines. And this was a factory filled with them. And underneath each machine was, I don't know, maybe 8 feet by 6 feet or so, was a large cookie sheet that collected grease, dripping oil. And my first paying job was to get on my hands and knees and clean the oil off the pants. And I didn't like it very much. I punch in, I go clean the things as fast as I could clean them, punch the card and get out of there.
This reminds me of that, the dirtiest jobs on television.
But it's funny because my parents to this day still tease me about the job, because I wouldn't be home, and the owner of the factory, who had a German accent, my mother would imitate his German accent, would be on the phone saying, "Where is the boy? He left. Where is the boy?" So,
what was a big family holiday for you guys?
Christmas and Thanksgiving, of course, were the big holidays. When for a number of years, Thanksgiving would involve the aunts and the uncles, and all the kids would come over and play touch football, and that was
What some of your favorite subjects when you were a student?
I love social studies, and as a matter of fact, that was one of my first picks, was to go into social studies, and it came down to physical education and social studies. So how did he become a guidance counselor? But social studies, and to this day, I love history.
If we look from our generation, though, you look at children today, you see the number of toys, things they have to play with. I'd like to ask you if you remember a toy that you once owned that was special to you.
Sure. I had a Davy Crockett fort with all the little stockade fences and all the little characters and all of that. Yeah, that was probably my favorite toy. Yeah, that and your baseball glove. You know.
How about a favorite season?
Spring.
Is it still your favorite
Yes.
season?
No, I don't even have to think about that one. Spring, for all the obvious reasons, you know.
Yes, go ahead, continue.
No. I mean, just, you know, going out to get the newspaper this morning, just take that extra deep breath and go, it's here.
Yes.
Because I'm not a winter to turn that question around. Winter, hey, winter. Not a winter person. I get out of here as fast as I can in the winter.
What about, again, coming out and taking a whiff, what about favorite aromas? Is there an aroma that evokes a memory for you of a particular time in your life? Pine. And what's the association?
I want to say always. I guess when I was about 12 years old, my parents bought a second home in the Poconos, surrounded by pine trees, on a lake. Okay. And to this day, when I smell white pine, you know, I say, it smells like the Poconos, you know? Oh.
Yes. Yeah. Chris, take us through from the first school that you attended all the way through your formal education.
Okay. First school I attended was St. Christopher's Elementary School. Who I found out recently, not recently, but in recent years, we actually have a famous alumni who's on CNBC every day, and that's Chris Matthews. I went to school with Chris, and his brother James was actually in my class. But yeah, I went to Catholic Elementary School for 8 years. The big decision in my family was, what do we do with him in high school? Because my brother, who was 2.5 years older than I, went to the local Catholic high school, which wasn't very local. He had to take 2 public buses. He didn't get a locker. They didn't have enough room. It was overcrowded, on and on and on. And less than 2 miles from my house, the city of Philadelphia had just constructed their last high school they ever built, but it was brand new in 1962. So I was given the go-ahead. I got permission to go to public school, which my father still laments. But I went to George Washington High School in Philadelphia, which was a wonderful experience for me. I graduated from high school in 1966 and went to Lock Haven University, which is a Pennsylvania state school. The joke always was, I'm going to Lock Haven, and people say, "Oh, how do you like Connecticut?" I go, "That's New Haven. I'm going to Lock Haven." Lock Haven's actually located about 25 miles east of Penn State. And it was a small state college. We had an enrollment of about 2,000 students. But again, a wonderful experience. I really loved it. And from there, I went to Brentwood. And of course, following advice of many colleagues, went to Stony Brook University and got into a graduate program there, which was really kind of a funny story because I went to graduate school at Stony Brook University and paid 85 cents a credit. And people say, "How did you do that?" My first job in Brentwood was as a health teacher. And as luck had it, I was certified as a health teacher in Pennsylvania, health and physical education. And that certification was reciprocal with New York State. So I got a job in New York State. But I never did the paperwork. Nobody told me how to do paperwork. And it came around Christmas of my first year teaching, and I was called into Central, and they said, you can't work here anymore after Christmas vacation because you're fired. Well, lo and behold, I found out about this program. Andy Kokari hooked me up with this program called the Intensive Teacher Training Program, ITTP. And to get into the program, you had to be uncertified, which, hey, I'm not certified because I didn't fill out the paperwork, teaching health full time, and, be working in New York State. So I fit the bill. I quick signed up. They took me. I got in and got my first 30 credits at Stony Brook in health education for virtually nothing. And then what I did after that was, I filled in the rest of the coursework requirements to get the master's degree from Stony Brook. And then last but not least, the career change that came about in the early 80s, I guess, or mid 80s, I decided I had to get out of the classroom. And guidance was something I really, appealed to me, looked like something I would really enjoy. So I went to CW Post, and lo and behold, got another master's degree in counseling. So that's the education. Whether or not it made me a smarter person, I don't think so. I met the requirements.
You met the requirements. And that also covers all your areas of certification that you were talking about just now, in terms of.
Have you ever gone into the state education department to see what you are certified in? You'd be amazed. Exactly. At some point in time, they added all this other stuff, and my thinking is to help out school districts that needed to cover a class here or there or the other thing. But technically, I have certificates for K through 12 health and physical education and K through 12 school counseling. So yeah, but it is an interesting exercise to see what we are certified in, because they added a lot of stuff. I don't know where that came from, but yeah.
You've had a lot of, I know you've loved doing what you've done all these years. And there are a number of things that could probably meet the criteria for one of your worst days. But in memory, give us an example of something that was, professionally speaking, one of the worst days that you had.
One of the worst days that I had. Oh my gosh. I think it would have to be in the classroom. When I don't know if I can give you a day, but when, as a matter of fact, in retrospect, I think I can give you a day. I think I can. And I think you were teaching at East Junior High at the same time I was. And I looked at, I was teaching in that year, I was, I'll never forget, I was in room 110, no, was it 110 or 10, whatever. But it was the first floor, and it was across from the office. And one of the kids, I had the nicest group of kids, and one of the kids said, "Mr. Thorpe, what is that?" And I looked outside the window, and they're literally on their hands and knees were SWAT team, Suffolk County SWAT team soldiers, police officers that were crawling past my window. And of course, that was the day that we had the hostage situation and the shooting. And a memory that I'll never, ever, ever forget was we were asked to escort the kids to staging areas. And I want to tell you, you were there, those kids evacuated that building and did exactly what they were told to do, to the point where I'm still in awe that they did that. But walking out the far end of the building, it was raining, and walking out and seeing the sea of umbrellas with network TV insignias on them. NBC, ABC, of course it was before CNN, and helicopters in the air. That was a pretty rough day. A sidebar to that day is that Steve Howland, who was our principal, got shot in the face. And Steve came down the stairs. This was related to me by John, who had cafeteria duty in the small cafeteria. And he walked past her. She was kind of out in the hall as he walked by, holding his hand to his face with, as Joan says, blood running down his fingers. And Joan's comment to him was, "I can see this day's going downhill fast." And for years he would tell that story and laugh about that story. Thank heavens he wasn't injured too seriously. He could have been. But yeah, it was a day that didn't end well. And it's a day that didn't end until almost 11:15 at night. I think you were still there with us.
Yes.
Yeah. Tough day.
Very tough day. Speaking of Brentwood, what was the year that brought you to Brentwood?
What was the year
that brought you there? When did you arrive?
I started in 1970.
And by the way, why did you come to Brentwood?
Fred Weaver. Fred Weaver was recruiting students at Lock Haven in the school cafeteria, the dining hall. And I was looking for a job. I was a man with a family on the way. And what I tried to do was line up a couple of interviews, within the same couple of days, so I wouldn't miss too many classes. And one of the stops was Long Island, and it was Brentwood.
Did you look at any other places?
Yeah, I looked at Liverpool, New York. There was another one. I don't remember what it was. But I never made it to those interviews because they offered me a job right then and there.
Okay.
And I interviewed with, last name Murphy.
Ed?
Ed Murphy. Went to Lindenhurst after I came there. And Ed, when the interview concluded, said to me, we usually don't do this, but there was a postal strike. I don't know if you recall that. Many people don't remember the postal strike. The only reason I remember it is because they said, you got the job. We would notify you by mail, but we don't trust the mail. So here is they handed me a packet of papers. Take this over to Central. They'll hand you a contract. And
done.
And again, as a sidebar, I signed for $7,200 and started work in September for $8,000. I was on top of the world. All my colleagues and classmates were starting at 66 and 64 in Pennsylvania.
Do you remember any of the questions that you were asked?
Yes,
in that interview?
Yes, I do. And I feel sorry for these people today because they're grilled. And my sense was that Mr. Murphy had other things on his agenda for the day, and he had to get through this interview, and he needed a health teacher, and you'll do. But his question was, you're teaching a class, and you see a kid in the back of the room. At that time, heroin was, not that it isn't now, but it was a big issue then too. You see, you see a student doing what appears to be heroin in the back of the classroom. What do you do? And my response was, do you have I imagine you have some method to contact people outside of your classroom, a phone or intercom? He said, yes, there's phones. So I pick up the phone, call the school nurse, at which point he said, okay, would you like to work here? So it wasn't such a tough question, but it's funny.
The first impression that you had of the district when you started that first year, what were some of the feelings that you recall you had? You said you were on cloud nine because of the income, because of what you signed for, but when you looked around...
I was scared to death. In the pit of my stomach, I was scared to death. And going back to a question a little bit ago, that high school in Northeast Philadelphia had one black student. Okay. 0 Hispanic students, Philadelphia at the time was not a place where Hispanics were making inroads or settling. And the city at that point in time was still very segregated. So, you had your white neighborhoods and your black neighborhoods. So the college that I went to, of course, upstate Pennsylvania, was a pretty conservative Pennsylvania school, even though it was a state school. And I think we had 2 or 3 black students and a handful of Hispanic students, but that was it. So when I walked into the classroom, Brentwood, I was looking at an ethnic mix that was foreign to me.
Yes. Chris, I'm going to pick up the pace of what we're doing just a little bit, so you'll notice the change of pace only because of our time.
Okay.
Who were some of the people you worked with that first year?
The first year, who were some of the people that I worked with?
Or first, second year in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, Mo Green and I taught health together for quite a while. We were usually across the hall from each other. Pete Perlow was across the hall from me for a long time. Nick Schroeder, Marty Rigger, Ronnie Albom. They were all the people that in those first couple of years that we worked with.
Was your training, your preparation that you had received prior to going into the classroom up to the task? Do you think that?
Oh, please. They had no clue. No clue whatsoever. And the real curveball was when I asked for the curriculum, and they said, we don't have one. So you're the health teacher. Design the curriculum, Oh, okay. What about textbooks? No, we don't have textbooks.
Now, given that response, you had a job description, but you also had your own reason for being there, what your purpose was in going into the field that you went into. How would you put that into words? Could you? What was your purpose?
Honestly, I went to college to become a physical education teacher, and I was told, if you give us a year in the classroom, we'll get you in the gym. And they did get me in the gym. It was 1984. 14 years down the road, Steve was able to squeeze me in and give me 2 or 3 phys ed classes mixed in with the health classes. But
that was a promise kept.
Yeah, it was a promise kept, and I had the perseverance to keep waiting.
Did you want it when it came?
Yeah, and I enjoyed it very much.
Okay.
I enjoyed it very much.
Do you, or did you have any continuing connection with some of your own teachers? At any point in your life, did you stay in touch with some of your teachers?
No, not really. No, that did not happen.
Do you have former students of your own who keep in touch with you?
Yes, I do. Email mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the ones from the last several years there, from college and what have you.
Chris, were you ever active in?
Some of them are teaching. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask you. I was moving on.
Move.
If you were ever active in the BTA?
Yes, I was. I want to call them the middle years.
Okay.
When I was at East, I was at East for a good 15, 16 years, and I guess after I was there 8 years or so, I was an alternate, I think.
Okay, a delegate.
Yeah, alternate delegate. And I remember going to Montauk for one of those conferences. I was staying at Gurney's Inn, and yeah. Yep.
Has the union itself ever been important to you personally?
Of course. Well, they've been very good to me. Okay. Let's put it that way. And it's hard to describe how I always felt supported. That if push came to shove, people were going to be there for you. Yeah. And when questions would arise, the answers that I got, I felt were honest answers. As I was preparing to retire, I had a situation where most of the year that I was 55, I was still working. I could have retired prior to that. My birthday is in September. And I remember talking to Joe Hogan, will they cheat me out of this incentive because I didn't? Absolutely not. They would never do that. And when he said it, you believed it.
Now, you've already mentioned that when you first began, you were scared to death when you came into the environment, you came into the classroom. Mm-hmm. In your later years of teaching, did you ever experience fear? Were you afraid at that point?
There were a couple of times in the high school where I found myself in a situation where you go, how did I get here? And where physical altercations were. I remember one in particular, and as a sidebar, one of the students involved called me from Suffolk County Jail later on, asking for how can I graduate kind of thing. But I was in between the two buildings, and this fight was starting, and a student here and a student here, and I was in the middle. Yeah. And instinctively, I just raised my voice as loud as I could, and was very firm about the fact that, you don't do this here, you take it outside, or whatever I was saying was just coming out of my mouth. And it worked. They walked away. But yeah, there were times there, yeah.
Here's an interesting spin on that. What makes you angry? What gets to you?
When I see, I don't want to say ignorance, but when I see things that just aren't right and are perpetuated, and it kept going, as a quick example, I was always an advocate as a guidance counselor of BOCES. I felt as though not everybody's going to college, not everybody's a scholar. It seems like educators all want them to be, but we need plumbers and carpenters and electricians. And the system made kids feel like that was a treat if they were going to let them do that, you know, and got in the way and wouldn't let them, you know. So that made me angry.
Chris, what was the actual date of your retirement, the year or the
2004.
2004?
Yeah, yeah.
In the spring.
Well, actually, as a guidance counselor, you work a couple of weeks in the summer. So, okay. Yeah, it was July.
Okay.
The second week in July.
Is there a particular accomplishment professionally that you have a right to be proud?
I think I made a difference. And I always found it interesting that you never knew where it came from. Sometimes you would think that you really helped this kid, maybe, and then there would be somebody who would come in later on and say, I can't tell you how much of a difference it made when you did X, Y, or Z. So
good feeling.
I think we made a difference. Yes. A lot of us.
What was your last building assignment?
R.O.B.S High School. Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually I was there, you know, the second part of my career. I was there from after the stint in the 10th grade center. You'd follow the kids, and they had a rotating deal back then, but they asked me to stay on, not to rotate and pick up a next group. So my first several years as a guidance counselor, I wanted to mention this, were very rewarding because I had done my internship at East Junior High. The year after I did my internship, Steve Allen, who was the building principal, made sure I had 2 periods in there. It made duty period and it made me an AIDP period. I mean, he was good that way. So I worked in guidance at East. Then I got the job at the high school, the 10th grade center, and we picked up those kids. So what I'm trying to get to is I had those kids as a classroom teacher. I had them I knew those kids from 7th grade to 12th grade. That was the class of 90. And then the kids that were after them, I also knew because I had them in the classroom in those other years. So.
And how many years of experience did you have?
34 years. 34 years.
Why did you decide it was time to leave?
I think financially it was time to leave. The things that I really enjoy in life were waiting, traveling, boating, the fishing, all of those things are more time for that.
What was the best part of doing what you did as a counselor? What was the most rewarding or the fun part of the job?
Every day was fun.
Okay.
Every day was fun. I worked with a great group of people, especially the later years in that office. It was a wonderful staff to work with. We had fun in the office.
I think I know the answer to this, but you have to tell me. Is there anything that you would have done differently?
I would have become a counselor sooner.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. What answer did you think you knew?
I thought you were going to say nothing. Knowing you.
No, I would have become a counselor sooner. Those early years in the classroom were a learning experience and challenging and fun, but as it wore on, it started to grind down.
Yes.
Yeah,
but you miss certain things.
Absolutely.
What do you miss?
The people. Right now, you mean? I miss the people. I miss everybody had a little role to play. I miss the daily joke that would come by every time someone would roll through. I miss, there was a period of time, I think you may have even have been there, where in my office in the morning, before school started, if you were to stick your head in my office, there were kids on the floor and there were teachers in the chairs. And it was laughter, and everybody had a cup of coffee or a bagel or whatever. And that was before school started, and it was a lot of fun.
So what don't you miss then?
What don't I miss? I don't miss the angry parents. I don't miss being in the gun sight, You know, guidance counselors are in the middle, man. You get everybody managing at the same time. I don't miss wanting to do the right thing and having your hands tied and you're not able to, and then, I mean, this is the angry part, you know, and then being called in and say, why didn't you do that? Well, because you wouldn't let me. You're not allowed to say that, you know. But
what was there that you would like to have accomplished, but for reasons of having your hands tied, you couldn't get to, or you weren't permitted to?
I would have liked to have. I think, to answer your question, I got to go here. I think our biggest failing as educators is that we graduate large groups of unskilled, barely qualified to graduate individuals who have nothing to fall back on. You know, they have a 75 or a 65 average, and they pass those minimum competency tests. And because we had to get them through the tests, we couldn't train them in something that they could make a living and make a difference. And so that's
was there a favorite year of all of the time?
1990.
Why?
Those kids graduated. I knew their families. I knew their brothers and sisters. I mean, I all the other years, I never really got to know a group like I knew that group. I mean, I knew them.
If you were to advise a beginning counselor, somebody who was going into the same field, and you could pull them aside and give them 1 or 2 lines of advice to take with them based on your experience, what would you tell somebody?
Parental contact, parental contact, parental contact.
Complete this phrase. Brentwood's teachers are
miracle workers.
And the students from Brentwood overall are
survivors.
And what haven't we spoken about, Chris, that you want to get in before?
What haven't we? I don't know. I think I wanted to touch upon the fact that you know, at East Junior High especially, there was a real sense of family. And to this point, there still is, you know. We grew up together. We watched people get married and have babies. Went through an awful lot of stuff. You know, there were years, about 20 of them, where Brentwood didn't hire too many people. So you worked with the same person, same group of people, day in, day out for 20 some years. You got to know each other pretty well. And it was a nice group. You know, I guess all of Brentwood, the saying used to be, we're family, dysfunctional, but family. And the same thing was true at the high school. There were some wonderful, wonderful people that we worked with for years.
You've given us a wonderful account of a marvelous career, and I want to thank you for being a part of this.
I want to thank Brentwood for giving me the opportunity. And you know, one last thing, they asked me to say something the night that I retired, and what I said was, you know, our principal, Tom O'Brien at the time, used to always say, there were days when I didn't want to go to work, but there was never a day when I didn't want to go to work in Brentwood. And my retort to that was, there was never a day when I went to work in Brentwood that I didn't find something to make it enjoyable and fun. It was a wonderful experience.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.